On the first day of President Trump's presidency, Pope Francis came out calling his immigration policy a disgrace. And now we have the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops also joining in with Pope Francis and calling the new immigration policy of the Trump-Vance presidency as deeply troubling. And so J.D. Vance recently fired back in an interview and said that he was actually quite heartbroken with the stance that the United States Conference of Bishops is taking. Now, a little bit of background. I'm going to show you the clip, so we'll do some commentary on them. A little bit of background here is that the United States bishops under Biden received, let me pull up the number here, $2.4 billion of federal payments. This is your tax dollars. $2.4 billion. That's just under the 4 years of Biden for migration services. So this money is taken from your taxes into the federal government and then distributed to the Catholic Church to facilitate the trafficking of migrants. And Catholics have been wising up to this over the past decade, and some call it a laundering service. It's definitely the way that the United States Conference of Bishops is receiving not just millions, but billions of dollars. Another number for you is that during Trump's first administration, the United States bishops received $384 million from the federal government. And now they're coming after Trump. And as I said last week, the really troubling part for me and for a lot of Catholics who I think are of good faith, of goodwill, the really troubling part is we had 4 years of Joe Biden, who said he was a Catholic. And Joe Biden promoted unnatural marriage. Joe Biden promoted abortion with your tax dollars, not just in America, but all over the world. And an open border policy that brought in fentanyl to the United States, violent gangs, rapists, violent criminals. And unfortunately, a lot of children were caught up in that migration and have experienced terrible things that will scar them for life. And I live in Texas, and I see this firsthand, and I've been saying this whole time when Francis pipes up and says, oh, open borders, no walls, build bridges, he doesn't realize, maybe he doesn't realize that we in the border states and all through America, but especially in the border states, we are seeing our communities plagued by an increase in crime, drugs, trafficking, violence. And it's not right. And it's not in accord with Catholic teaching. And people who are aware of this, Catholic and non-Catholic, want to put an end to it, right? We need to stop illegal immigration into the United States of America and to see the bishops coming after Trump and Vance and the Pope, coming after Trump and Vance after they sat there like cowards for 4 years and didn't say anything about Biden. It's just yellow. It's cowardly. It's wrong. And it looks like the optics, bishops, if y'all are out there watching, the optics is y'all didn't do anything under Biden because that $2.4 billion was coming into your checking accounts. And now you're speaking up within the first week of the President Trump presidency. Why? Because it has to do with money flowing to you. And the optics from us out in the pews is absolutely horrible. The optics make y'all look like Judas. It's all about money. It's all about Benjamins. It's all about billions. And it's not about the safety of our people, children, trafficking, drug abuse, real moral problems that are affecting everyday people on both sides of the border. Y'all look like money-hungry executives and not shepherds of the sheep. Now, J.D. Vance was asked about this. I'm going to play the clip here. And J.D. Vance says that this was heartbreaking for him. Here's the clip.
me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops.
And the statement is that the Trump-Vance policy on immigration is deeply troubling. So the U.S. bishops are calling it out. Vance says, as a practicing Catholic, I'm heartbroken by this. And then he explains why. It's very good.
Needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants.
And it's not $100 million. Under Biden, as I just said, it was $2.4 billion, according to LifeSite News.
Are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We're going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Donald Trump promised to do that. And I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked.
There we go. See, now we're getting into it. And Catholics are like, Catholics are not giving money to Catholic charities because Catholic charities is at the forefront of these migration services. There's been already some scandals caught up with Catholic charities in border states. All right, so now J.D. Vance, vice president, is shining light on this. And this is going to get much bigger. This is going to be a huge problem for the United States bishops. Here he goes.
Because of the wide open border of Joe Biden.
You personally
let them talk about
going
people like Laken Riley
churches.
who were brutally murdered.
I love how she says, so you personally support them going to schools. They're so greasy.
People like Laken Riley who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or anybody else, in a way that keeps us safe.
What's wrong with that? From a Catholic point of view, that's, to me, seems right down the line orthodox, good, moral, in accord with natural law. If you read St. Thomas Aquinas, you read traditional Catholic theology, borders are real, nations are real, states are real, kingdoms are real, and you can't just barge in. It's illegal. Now, the Catholic bishops are getting billions of dollars through this program, so they're adjusting their theology for what benefits them monetarily. A lot of people have said, I don't understand the bishops. I mean, they have these diocesan appeals, these bishop appeals, and people aren't giving anymore, and some dioceses are going bankrupt, and the laity are unhappy. Especially since COVID, giving is down. Why don't the bishops appeal to their people? And then they'll open up their checkbooks. Part of that problem, so you understand, is that they are getting money on the side. They don't need to make people in the pews happy if they have $2.4 billion in 4 years coming them from the American taxpayer. That's a lot easier to obtain than it is to preach well, provide reverent liturgies, inspire the Catholic faithful so that they want to build schools and cathedrals and parishes and rectories, convents, universities. If we look up and we see abuse, embezzlement, lawsuit settlements, heretical sermons, Eucharistic abuse, liturgical abuse, we're not going to want to give y'all money. And they've been able to turn a blind eye to that because they're getting money on the side from the federal government. It's kind of like the same situation in Germany. The Catholic Church in Germany is subsidized directly by the states from taxpayers. It's unfortunately a broken, ancient, medieval system. And what that does is it allows the German bishops to be liberal, out of touch, unorthodox, insane in liturgy, but they keep getting that money through tax revenue. Now, I'm not against the state, a Catholic state in a situation where Christendom is developing or does exist, for the state to subsidize the Catholic Church. That's happened since the days of Constantine. But in this situation, It's not just subsidizing to build a beautiful cathedral or to open up a monastery for 500 monks, as you saw in the medieval era. This money is given to facilitate migration services illegally across the border, and they're being rewarded for it financially. And it has to be called out. All right. This is a principle of Catholic theology, which has to do with national sovereignty and private property and borders. And it's part of our Catholic moral tradition. Now, if you'd like to learn more about that, while we're in January, we have open enrollment over at the New St. Thomas Institute. And 11 years ago, I realized that a lot of Catholics are not receiving or have not received good catechesis, whether at their first communion, confirmation, throughout their life, sermons that were confusing. And so Joy and I were like, how can we bring Thomas Aquinas and Orthodox traditional theology, philosophy, and morality to the masses? And so we started the New St. Thomas Institute 11 years ago, and it's called New St. Thomas Institute because it's a new way of doing things, and it's named after St. Thomas Aquinas. And we offer 10 certificate courses, and you can earn your certificates online. We have a certificate in Catholic philosophy and theology. So if you want to go deeper in Thomas Aquinas and look at some of these issues that's in the Summa Theologia regarding sovereignty, nationhood, borders, who is my neighbor, the elements of remote and proximate responsibility. For example, I have more of a responsibility to feed my children, my biological, or if you have adopted children, you have more of an obligation to feed them than you do a child far away. Now, we should try to feed all children, but Thomas Aquinas gives us the basis of our obligations and duties in this life, and there is a hierarchy. So these are all things we need to know. If you want to go to the next level and perhaps take a course that we offer, that I teach on the Latin Mass. I walk you through the whole Latin Mass, teach you how to pray the prayers in Latin. We have a course on the Old Testament, the New Testament, theology, apologetics, how to answer objections from atheists, from Muslims, from Jewish people, from Protestants. All of these courses are going to bring you up to speed. So you're not just conversant in your Catholicism, you're fluent in your Catholicism. And in January right now, we've opened it up. You can get started and get all 10 courses and earn your certificate in all 10 courses, plus get the digital searchable Catholic library, all the church fathers, East and West, translated into English, the Douay-Rheims Bible, and so much more, plus a bunch of bonuses. So you can get started right now today for $1. It's a special offer only here on this YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube, the link is directly below me. Click on that and you can get started on your courses and take your faith to the next level and become fluent in Catholic theology, philosophy, morality through the lens of St. Thomas Aquinas, the great Catholic doctrinal teacher, the angelic doctor. So sign up today and go to nsti.com to learn more, or click the link below and start for $1. All right, now I want to share a second clip, and this is J.D. Vance discussing immigration. And it's a short one, but I thought it was good. And here it is.
Just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years...
I got to back it up to her part.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by...
This is a unique country.
This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers. But just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world.
Look at her. She loves that. She loves that. Yeah, I mean, there is progress. The way something is set up doesn't mean that that's the way it is going forward in perpetuity. Most things in life are not like that, whether how you start a business or a family or a corporation. There are often events, principles, extraordinary things that happen at the inception of a thing, but then there has to be an order, right? And we see this in the Catholic Church, right? Over time, there was more order introduced in the liturgy, in the councils, in the doctrines, in canon law. And that's completely normal, completely fine, and completely good. And it's completely fine for any nation in the world. There has to be order and there has to be law. It cannot be the policy of the United States of America that all 8 billion people on planet Earth have a right to move illegally to the United States. Some liberals want that to be the policy. All 8 million people on Earth have a right to relocate and live illegally within the borders of the United States of America. That can't be true. There has to be laws. There has to be limits. Now, you may have missed my show last week, and I talked about how Pope Francis on day one came after President Trump. He didn't ever critique Joe Biden for 4 years, an alleged Catholic president. And on day one, he comes after Trump. And here's part of the quote. Francis says, "If true, this will be a disgrace because it makes the poor wretches who have nothing pay the bill. This won't do. This is not the way to solve things. That's not how things are resolved." And my question is not rhetorical. How are they resolved and how are they solved and who does pay the bill? Are Americans perpetually obliged to pay the rent bill, the breakfast bill, the lunch bill, the dinner bill, the heating bill, the water bill in perpetuity for people who are living here illegally? No, we're not. We're not on the hook. We're not obliged morally to pay for those bills in perpetuity for millions and millions and millions of people. Now, the United States of America has always valued that if there's someone who has skills, value, wants to come to the United States of America, we have a visa process for people to come. All of that is negotiable. But to just have an open, porous border where anyone, including someone who was just dumped out of a prison, is not right. And we need to hear the United States bishops affirm that truth. Because here's what might happen here, my friends. We might soon see that not only are the bishops not getting money from the pews and from the offertory baskets and plates, and they're not getting money from their diocesan annual appeals, but Trump and Vance may cut them off so that the $2.4 billion that they were counting on this next 4 year, that might go bye-bye. And then the bishops are going to be looking around and there's going to be no funds. And on top of that, the lay people are going to be, the faithful lay people are going to be sitting in the pew on Sunday and say, Francis and the U.S. bishops talked down to us and told us that illegal immigration is worth fentanyl being sold in our schools, gangs, violence, women being ravished, and a huge tax on school districts and civil services. The bishops told us that was all worth it so that they could get their $2.4 billion every 4 years. And the lay people are going to remember that. And they're going to close their wallet and they're going to close their checkbooks. And we're going to have a disaster on our hands in the Catholic Church in the United States of America. Another element here that a lot of people don't know, and you can learn more about it if you read my book, Infiltration, which is a 200-year history of how the Catholic Church, which is one holy Catholic and apostolic, good, beautiful, the bride of Christ, but how the Catholic Church over the last 200 years has been infiltrated by wolves in sheep's clothing in a systemic way, not accidentally. It's the plot to destroy the church from within. You can get a copy of it at Amazon. There's an Audible book, or if you want a signed copy, you can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/Dr. Taylor Marshall. I'll personally hand sign a copy and send it to you. There's different levels on Patreon, so make sure you get in the right one. But we're learning the infiltration is real. And Francis appointed Cardinal McElroy as Archbishop of D.C. That was a snubbing of the nose to Pope Francis. To President Trump and J.D. Vance. He placed the most liberal, the most pro-LGBT bishop in the United States as Archbishop Cardinal of Washington, D.C. This is a violent game of chess. And I don't think the U.S. bishops, with the momentum that Trump and Vance have, and I don't think Pope Francis has the momentum or strength to win this battle of attrition, because funding is going to be cut. And what a lot of people don't understand is the wealthiest bishops' conference in the whole world is the United States Conference of Bishops. And they're receiving $2.4 billion from the U.S. government. And you know, some of that money is making its way to Rome. Some of our surplus is making it to Rome. So when the faucets turn off from the U.S. government into the U.S. Conference of Bishops, the faucets are going to turn off from the USCCB to Rome. Follow the money. If you want to understand this discourse, follow the money. Well, gee, Taylor, are you saying that they don't really care about the gospel and they just care about millions of dollars? Follow the money. Actions speak louder than words. Judas Iscariot, who watched Jesus Christ walk on water, raise the dead, heal lepers, drive out demons, multiply loaves and fishes. Judas Iscariot witnessed all of these miracles. And Judas Iscariot sold out the Lord and Master, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, Son of God and Son of Man, for 30 pieces of silver. Not even 30 pieces of gold. 30 pieces of silver. He betrayed God. And there are people in the clergy right now who will betray God for 30 pieces of gold, silver, 30 Bitcoin, 30 million, 3 billion, 30 billion. Once you have a price, you're negotiable. You could start at, I want 3 million. You might end up with 30 pieces of silver, but your destiny is with Judas. That's what's scary. This might be the moment in which the infiltration is finally revealed. And I say it's time to rip off the Band-Aid. Let's stare the infiltration in the face, because the only way that you can cure the infection is by examining the wound and the extent of the infection. And then you begin a cure. You expel that, whether it's a parasite, virus, bacteria, cancer. You expel the malady from the body, and the body is healthier. Now, the body here is the body of Christ, the church, and the gates of hell will never prevail, never, ever prevail against the Catholic Church. But that doesn't mean, by the way, if you're enjoying today's show, like and subscribe. That doesn't mean that the church won't have setbacks. Look at the crisis of the 4th century. A priest named Arius taught that Jesus was not co-eternal with the Father. The Son of God was not co-equal with the Father. He was not of the same substance of the Father. He was a lesser creature of the Father. That's heresy. We believe that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost are co-eternal, co-equal, consubstantial with one another, homoousia. Arius betrayed that. And yet most of the bishops in the 4th century were heretical. The lay people were confused. The great leaders of the Orthodox movement, like St. Basil, St. Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory Nazianzus, St. Athanasius, they were persecuted. They had difficulties. The lay people rallied to them. But the gates of hell never prevailed against the church in the 4th century, even though the majority of bishops were bad and were heretical. You understand that? So we shouldn't expect that in a later century, we could have a majority of bishops being bad. It is within the realm of possibility because it has happened in our Catholic history. We have had bad popes, evil popes, sinful popes. It's within the realm of possibility. And so when we have these conversations, the response is, well, you just hate the Pope. You're Protestant. You're schismatic. You're sedevacantist. No. Because all of those same pejoratives and accusations, I'm sure, were being levied against St. Athanasius, St. Basil, St. Gregory's. It's a difficult position to be in when you love the Catholic Church, you love the Catholic faith, you love the Pope, you love the papacy, you love your bishops, and then you're seeing them infiltrate. But this is kind of encouraging, not encouraging, but we were promised by Jesus Christ, our King, our Lord, our Savior. He said that wolves in sheep's clothing would exist among us. He warned us about it. So we should not be surprised when we look around and perhaps our priest or our bishop, cardinal, or even a pope is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because Jesus said it would happen. And it does happen in every single century of the Catholic Church. Bad men get in. The response for us is not to leave the Catholic Church. Our response is to stay, to pray, and to fight. If you agree with me, like today's podcast, share it on X, share it on Facebook. We are streaming live right now, and we have over 3,300 people watching on YouTube, Facebook, and X. It'll be uploaded to Rumble later on today. So like and subscribe. Today's sponsor is Ready Pantry. Now, a lot of people, you hear them say, they're preppers and they're preparing for World War III. That could happen. But there's also a lot of other events, weather outages, snowstorms. We've seen hurricanes. We've seen fires. We've seen things happening in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, LA. We see controversies in the Middle East. We see pandemics. We hear rumors of monkeypox, bird flu, some other pandemic, a grid collapse, election, political controversies. And many people know that it's important to have, cash, money, but what about food? 78% of Americans would go hungry within 3 days in an emergency. So why not be prepared? And I'm recommending that y'all use Ready Pantry. Ready Pantry offers shelf-stable food that tastes amazing and has a 25-year shelf life. Ready Pantry is the freshest long-term storage there is. Freeze-dried within months, being delivered to your door. They've got great meals for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even dessert and snacks. Ready Pantry is an American-based company, and the products are sourced in America. These meals taste great, contain real ingredients, and are packed with enough calories and nutrition for everyone in the family, not to mention the peace of mind you get knowing that you have an emergency supply of food ready for anything. There are 3 supply packages, 72 hours, 1 week, and 1 month supply. So it's easy to pick exactly what you need for you and your family. And Ready Pantry offers discounts up to 20% when you order multiple packages like the 3-month, 6-month, or even 1-year supply. So stock your pantry now with buy now, pay later options available at checkout for readypantry.com/Taylor. readypantry.com/Taylor. Ready Pantry offers discounts for 3, 6, and 1-year supply up to 20% off. Go to readypantry.com/Taylor. Also use the promo code Taylor to save an additional 10% off your order plus free shipping. So use that promo code Taylor, 10% off and free shipping. All right. I have one more video I want to show you, and this is from the Border Czar, who is Catholic. I did not know that. And so he addresses Pope Francis and the U.S. bishops critiquing Trump and Vance, and here is what he has to say. Let me back it up here.
Now doing with this new government, deporting all of these people. We've got, obviously there's going to be a lot of media searching for the sad stories here, trying to turn public opinion against this operation. What's your message to the American people as you guys do this work?
Okay, so this is the Border Czar. I didn't know he was Catholic. It's kind of cool. So he's coming from a point of view of being raised Catholic. He's a cradle Catholic. And he has some words for Pope Francis. He says, I'm going to preview this for you. He says that Francis needs to take care of the Catholic Church because there's real problems in the Catholic Church. And he doesn't need to be looking at a lawful protection of the border in the United States of America as a disgrace. So here he is.
Well, let me give a message to the Pope. I'm a lifelong Catholic. I was born Catholic. I've been through Catholic doctrine. Look, he only concentrates on fixing the Catholic Church, first of all. He's got big problems there.
Okay, so he's got to fix the Catholic Church. He's got big problems there.
In the Vatican, they have a wall around the Vatican. And if you illegally enter the Vatican, the crime is serious. You'll be charged with a serious crime, be jailed.
Yeah.
So he can protect the Vatican where he lives. He can build a wall where he lives. Where American people are not allowed that? No.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of people are making this argument. Vatican is a country. It's a nation. It has walls. It has borders. I can't walk into the Vatican with a sleeping bag and a tent and a propane burner and some ready pantry food and say, hey, just can't find anywhere to sleep. Hotels are too expensive in Rome. I'm just going to live in the Vatican Palace, or I'm going to set my tent up in the Vatican Garden. Don't worry about me. I'm law abiding. It's all good. No, I'm going to be arrested. I could go to jail. I could pay a fine. I'm definitely going to be ejected from the Vatican City. There are gunners. There are people with guns at Vatican City. You don't just want to climb up one of the walls of the Vatican City and start running around in the Vatican Garden. Things are going to happen to you that are negative. And yet Francis is literally pontificating and saying America should not be enforcing their border. And it comes from liberation theology, and it comes from socialism and communism. The idea for Francis is America is rich. People in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, these places, they're poor. Because America's rich and they're poor, there should be a redistribution of wealth. If America is not going to send that money to those countries, and we send a lot of money to those countries, by the way, if we're not going to send the money, which we do, they have a right to invade our nation and start to enjoy that wealth. That's the communist way of looking at things. All right, that's the liberation theology Marxist take on immigration. All right, he has a little bit more to say. Let me share that here.
Securing the border saves lives. He needs to understand that. When we secure the border, when less people come, less women get raped by the cartel, less children die in the river, less Americans die from fentanyl overdoses. He ought to stick to it. He ought to stick to the Catholic Church and fix that. That's a mess.
That's exactly right.
You got to stick to the Catholic Church and fix. The Catholic Church is a mess right now. He needs some work. And yeah, Francis needs to spend a lot less time looking at the Mexican-American border and look at his own house. There's a lot of problems there. So I'm going to open up the live chat. I'm going to take super chats first. And we got a lot of people watching today. Welcome to the Dr. Taylor Marshall podcast. Glad y'all are here. Hot topic. And I was just at the March for Life over the weekend, and it was amazing. We had Speaker Mike Johnson, who I got to meet with, address the March for Life. We had Vice President J.D. Vance, who gave a stunning talk. We had President Trump, who gave an address from the Oval Office. He wasn't on the stage. All three talks were amazing. I was especially impressed by President Trump's talk because it's the most pro-life I've ever heard him speak. And so this week I am going to be dedicating a show to J.D. Vance's talk and President Trump's talk on the pro-life topic and analyze their speeches because they're absolutely excellent. Unless you were there, you probably missed them, and there's a lot of good content there. And I think it reveals that, a lot of pro-lifers and a lot of Catholics have been cynics and skeptics about the pro-life position of President Trump in particular, and even J.D. Vance. And I'll admit, I was one of them. I made a video that had, 300,000-400,000 views on that topic regarding J.D. Vance and his Catholic faith. And I don't know exactly what was going on all in those days. I think a part of it had to do with campaigning and equivocation, maybe. I don't know. I'm not going to go there. But I think from what I heard at the March for Life from Vance and Trump, again, Not perfect, okay, if you look at the record, especially on Trump, and you talk about IVF and other things. But what was spoken, what was promised, what has already been done in pardoning pro-life activists. And then I also was able to go into the House of Representatives during the Born Alive Act for that to be passed by the House. And I watched Democrats argue in favor of allowing a child who survived an abortion to scream and cry and receive no medical attention. And I couldn't believe I heard Democrats arguing for that. Fortunately, the Republicans every Democrat voted against it except for one Democrat. And it was passed in the House. So I was happy to be part of that. So a lot of great pro-life things happened over the last weekend while I was in D.C. with my son Jude and his Catholic high school. Amazing weekend. And so I'm going to try this week to carve out a show to look at those speeches and talk about that. All right, so let's jump into our live chat, our super chats, etc. Just a reminder, join New St. Thomas Institute, take the courses, begin for $1. You can join at nsti.com, or you can use the link in the show notes and join and get started for only $1. And then also make sure you get a little supply going, or a lot of supply, over at readypantry.com/Taylor. Use promo code Taylor and get up to 10% off plus free shipping. All right, jumping into our live chat. We have 3 super chats queued up. David Lopez is the first one. A pope says that USA having a wall is wrong, while the pope supports having a wall at the Vatican. Hypocrite. Yeah, I mean, this will never be overcome for Francis. I mean, unless he tears down that wall, until we start seeing criminals, gangs, and drug dealers living at peace in the Vatican, none of us are going to let off on that argument. I agree, David Lopez. Another super chat from David Lopez. If Trump and Vance does cut off billions of dollars from the bishops in the U.S., good. And then he follows up with, I went to a legit Latin mass, and while I didn't receive Holy Communion as a catechumen, it was beautiful. And how dare that Holy Father limit this masterpiece? Yes, if the traditional Latin mass was good, true, and beautiful in 1950, and in 1850, and in 1650, and in 1450, and in 1350, and so on, it's still good right now. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing deficient. It is our tradition as Roman Catholics. Seven Lilies says pro-life orgs use the women have been brainwashed as an excuse for murder, while at the same time accuse liberals of making excuses for black criminals. I'm not entirely sure of this comment, but I can speak to the women have been brainwashed. I think, this is a spectrum. There are women who are on their 15th abortion, and they don't care. They just use it as a fix. And I think they know exactly what they're doing, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum is a girl who's 15 to 19 and gets pregnant, and her parents freak out, and they're like, we're taking care of this. And they yell and scream at her and drive her to a Planned Parenthood. I think in general, our culture is pro-death and not pro-life. And most people are willing to take a life in order to prevent any mishaps in their career path or in their life. So I think, in all these cases that there is a spectrum, but I think as a society, as a culture, this is almost seen as a form of women's empowerment. And that's not being brainwashed. That's being a Jezebel. That's being diabolical. But again, I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush. There is a spectrum there, but I see your point. All right, another super chat came in from Mark Denbeeson. I am proudly rigid as it helps me to stay on the narrow path to heaven. The all religions are path to God theory that Francis espouses describes a very wide path, and we know where that leads. Yeah, remember our Lord Jesus Christ said, there's a wide path and there's a narrow path. He didn't say that there's one path everyone's going to go into heaven, or multiple paths all going to heaven. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He is the path. He is the gate. He is the door, not multiple paths. Thank you, Mark. Tina Martin says, I don't understand when we have a pope that is literally going against the word of God that we just remove him. Pope Francis is not a follower of Jesus. So this is one of the difficulties, because in canon law, no one judges the first see. No one judges the apostolic see of Rome, except if he deviates from faith. That's the ancient adage that goes back, I think, to Gratian. So there can't be a recall. There can't be a deposition. St. Robert Bellarmine, I've talked about this on previous podcasts, says that a pope who falls into tyranny or heresy can be admonished by the cardinals, and they can determine if he has fallen from the faith as a manifest heretic. And if he is a manifest heretic, he ipso facto, de facto, falls from the papacy. He no longer has the papacy. He no longer has the munus, or the office of the papacy. And in that case, the cardinals don't remove him. He's been removed by God. The cardinals just recognized that he is no longer the pope. And that is one of the possible outcomes of the 5 opinions of Robert Bellarmine. The 5 opinions of Robert Bellarmine are in De Romano Pontifico. The solution to this is in De Ecclesia, 2 different books by Robert Bellarmine. You have to kind of put those together to get the full picture. So that is the conundrum, Tina, that we are in. Renee X, the church should have taken a prominent stance to denounce the legalization of abortion. Agreed. And this is what irks me, is that Biden was so pro-choice. You might even say he and Kamala were the most pro-choice, pro-A presidency in the history of America. And how many times did the Pope call that out? How many times? Let's just take a guess. All right. Let me know in the live chat. How many times did Pope Francis speak to the unspeakable evil of the A word, ABOR? How many times did he speak about that towards or about Joe Biden in 4 full years? How many times? I'm going to go in the live chat. How many times did he speak about that? No one's answering. Maybe there's a time lag. Well, I'll let you know. All right. It's 0 times. Okay. Francis sat there for 4. Here it comes. Everybody's saying 0. He sat there for 4 years and said zip about the most aggressive pro-abortion platform in the history of America and said nothing. All right, let's try another one, y'all. Okay. Y'all may not know this, but Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had the strongest platform favoring unnatural marriage. Okay, y'all tracking with me? And were the most LMNOP platform in the history of the United States of America, which is directly contrary to Catholic moral teaching. How many times did Pope Francis address that part of the platform for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? How many times? Let's take a guess. I'll pause. Think about it. Okay, that's enough time. 0. 0 times did Francis in 4 years address that problem. And when Joe Biden met with Pope Francis and said, can I still receive communion? Am I a Catholic in good standing? Francis affirmed he's a Catholic in good standing and told him to receive communion. Now, President Trump has been president and J.D. Vance vice president for 1 week. 1 week. Okay, 7 days. How many times has Pope Francis spoke out against their policy on immigration, which is not intrinsically evil? For Francis, once. for the United States Conference of Bishops, also once in 7 days. And the United Conference of Bishops, those yellow-bellied cowards, said nothing about Biden on the A word or LMNOP or unnatural marriage for 4 years. They sat there and did nothing. You know why? Because $2.4 billion was going into their pocket. It's like that Wu-Tang Clan song, cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar, dollar bill. That song is like playing on repeat over at the United States Conference of Bishops. Cash rules everything around me. What is the other explanation? I would love a Jesuit to come on the Dr. Taylor Marshall podcast, or a bishop from the USCCB. I invite them on for a discussion that will be kind, courteous, respectful. You know I will be. And I just wanted to ask one question, and that is, why in 7 days have y'all applied more rhetorical rebuke and scrutiny to Trump Vance on the border, which financially hurts you, than you did on Biden and Kamala Harris in 4 years? Why are you so bold now to leave your rectories and your apostolic palaces to issue public statements against the policy of Trump Vance when for 4 years under Biden Harris you said nothing about issues that are directly, manifestly, and publicly immoral? Shame on you, your excellencies, your eminences, your holiness. Shame on you that you remain quiet during the 4-year presidency of a self-professed Catholic promoting wicked things in America and the world. And then in a 7-day period, you've already shots fired over the immigration policy of Trump Vance. It's hypocrisy. Shame on them. John Lemistra, money, money, money. Andrea Corrada says they will never come on your show. You know more than them. I don't know if I know more than them. They may know a lot more than I do. But I do know this. I do know that they sat quietly, I would allege cowardly, for 4 years and said not a peep, while money went into their checking accounts. And now that money might dry up, they suddenly have this public boldness to challenge Trump and Vance on an issue that is ambiguous morally. And I would even argue Trump and Vance are on the correct side of it from a Catholic moral tradition. It just looks like they want millions, actually billions of dollars. Jesus is king. The Pope is an antichrist, but not the antichrist. There's a distinction there. He's definitely not the antichrist, because the antichrist will be Jewish, and the antichrist will be loved by nearly everyone on earth. He will be so charismatic. If you want to learn about the antichrist in every verse of the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, I encourage you to copy my book, Antichrist and Apocalypse. It's a best-selling book on Amazon. It was for a while the #1 book in biblical studies, beating out all Protestants. This is the Catholic take on the end times. It's called Antichrist and Apocalypse. You can get it at Amazon, Audible, or you can get a signed copy over at patreon.com/Dr. Taylor Marshall. Or if you don't want to read the book, I have a full online course on the end times and take you through the entire book of Revelation from a Catholic point of view with the church fathers and Thomas Aquinas and Robert Bellarmine. You can get started on that course on Catholic end times. If you join $1 this week, and get started on that course. Stephanie Jimenez How was the March for Life? Random one. I've always wondered why didn't African Americans did not really get evangelized into the Catholic faith. That's two questions. Okay, first, March for Life was awesome, and I want to do a show on it. J.D. Vance's speech was amazing. Trump's speech was very impressive, and I want to give time to those in a different show. I was going to do that today, but then when I saw this, J.D. Vance, U.S. bishops immigration debate, I knew I had to jump on it. It's a big story. And then you've always wondered, hold on, I'm going to clear my throat. Why didn't African Americans not really get evangelized into the Catholic? There were a lot of African American Catholics. There still are a ton of African American Catholics. And I think what's interesting about Catholicism in America is we had an integration from day one. And you see that in all the South American and the Central American countries. What you see in Protestantism is you see the African Methodist churches and then the white Methodists, and then, segregation with Anglican, Black Anglican, white Anglican. The Catholic Church, of course, is only one church. We don't divide along national lines. So, and there's already African American men being ordained Catholic priests early on. I think the reason why the majority of African Americans are not Catholic has to do with the faith of the slave owners. Those who were engaged in the transportation of slaves were often Jewish. A lot of people don't know that. And then the purchasers of slaves were generally in the South. And from the 16 and 1700s, Southerners tended to be Anglican or Church of England, which is Protestant. All right, that's the religion descending from King Henry VIII. It becomes known in America after the Revolution as the Episcopalian Church. There's that woman bishop who really railed into President Trump last week. We did a show on that. She represents that tradition. So the faith that would have been taught or handed down to slaves from their masters would have been Anglican or Episcopalian. And then during the Great Awakening in the 1800s, you had circuit riders who were all over America, but predominantly in the South. They're doing big tent revivals, and they are primarily Methodist and Baptists. Okay, they're on horses. These are preacher guys. They come to your town. They put up a tent or have an outdoor meeting. They preach, altar call to conversion. People get saved. Hallelujah. And then once that happens, he rides off to the next town and the next town and the next town. That's the Great Revival movement. 1800s, mainly 1800s. And since those writers, those traveling preachers were primarily Methodist and Baptists, what you see in the American South is African Americans are generally Baptist, or they belong to some form of Methodism, like the African Methodist Episcopal Church, etc., but mostly Baptist. And that has to do with the white culture in the South. And so that's what gets imbibed amongst the African American population, because that's their experience. Now, you will find in places like Washington, D.C. or in Louisiana a stronger Catholic presence amongst African Americans. But again, that has to do with regional and cultural differences. Hope that makes sense. How are we on time? Okay, we're coming up to our stop point of 1 hour. Cheryl, I can understand the Universal Church wanting to welcome refugees, but I, as a Catholic in England, have realized the majority of these people are not refugees, but economic migrants who are coming. Yes, Cheryl. And this is what I said earlier in today's podcast. And if you're enjoying it, please like the podcast. Share it on X, share it on Facebook. If you think like a communist, like a Marxist, if you're a Catholic, seminarian, a Jesuit, and you went to seminary in the 70s, 80s, you learned liberation theology. Liberation theology is Marxism cloaked in Catholic language. And liberation theology goes like this. Moses came and said, "Let my people go." So Moses was about liberating the slaves and the impoverished. And then Jesus came and he also hung out with poor people. And so since those two stories are told, what we should do is we need to go and be politically active and liberate the oppressed and the poor. Okay, so that's liberation theology. So it's sort of a Christian veneer over Marxism. And some of them are outright supporters of Che and Marx and Castro, etc. If you look at America and you're like, they're rich, look at their GDP. Look at the GDP of Guatemala. There's no parity there. America's way up here. How are we going to redistribute that wealth? Well, America either has to send it over to Guatemala and balance it out, or Guatemala has to come to America. And so the 21st century Marxists have discovered that through caravans, airplanes, and boats, they can redistribute wealth by proxy and by geographical relocation. And since Western nations, unlike Asian or Muslim nations, Western nations have built an amazing safety net for medical care, education, universities, scholarships, Social Security, the list goes on and on. It's very easy to redistribute wealth and help those who are from poorer regions by just dropping them into those nations, and they know that that safety, security, Social Security net is there for them. So the Marxists, instead of starting a war like the USSR, they're like, let's just use caravans, boats, and airplanes and mix it all up, and then that will naturally spread out the wealth. The problem is, kind of sounds like maybe a good idea, unless you believe in private property. The problem is that these people often abuse. Well, first of all, they're there illegally, so it's just wrong. But they also abuse those systems. And you'll see gangs taking over hotels, apartment buildings. They bring with them drug abuse, disrespect for women in slight ways and in big ways, right? And then just a general sag on the culture and the economy. And the people who are already living there, Francis says, who's going to pay the bill for that? I don't think, middle class people who are trying to build a family, they got 3, 4, 5 kids, and they're trying to pay those bills. It's not like they're billionaires or millionaires. Why should they be taxed? Some of these schools in Texas are saying have 40% of the student body is illegal immigrants. Why are the parents paying property tax and 40% of the recipients are illegal? That's not right. It's just wrong. All right, we're bumping up here. I want to encourage you to pray your rosary every single day. Pray the rosary every day you're not on the team. And I want to encourage you to find a traditional Latin Mass. I want to encourage you to pray for all of our church leaders from the top all the way to your local pastor. And who knows where this is going? I certainly don't know. I'm generally optimistic because the leadership is more pro-life than it was a few weeks ago. Immigration is a truly horrific problem in America, and it's being addressed. And then I would say I'm deeply concerned about the U.S. bishops. I'm concerned about their convictions. I'm concerned about their means for acquiring billions of dollars. And I'm concerned with their moral theology, that they're willing for us to suffer for the sake of an ideology or for a government payout. It's not a good look, and they need to correct course really quick. All right. Visit our sponsor, Ready Pantry. Use promo code Taylor or click the link below in the show notes or in the pinned comment. If you want to start online courses at the New St. Thomas Institute, I'll be happy to be your online teacher. Let's get your Catholicism into fluency. Let's study Thomas Aquinas. Let's study scripture. Let's study tradition. We can do it together. You can join. Just click the link below underneath this YouTube video, and you get started for just $1. Take up to 10 courses and earn your certificate in all 10 of those courses. And until next time, remember our Lord Jesus Christ is you're the light of the world and the salt of the earth. So go out there and be salty. God bless, Godspeed, subscribe. I'll be back in a day or so to talk about March for Life and other positive things that are happening in our culture and in the church. God bless and Godspeed.